Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroyev. Thank you for coming to my 93rd webinar, which is called How to Improve Your Ability to Calculate. Okay, let's wait a little bit for more attendees to come. Oh, now I see 8 viewers here on Twitch. I'm also streaming this webinar on YouTube. That's right. Okay, so I'm back from my vacation. I've been to the south part of Russia, where my daughter played a soccer championship. Her team got the second place, which is good because the first place, or the Moscow team took the first place, and of course in Moscow they have 20 million people, and that's why they have a really wide choice of football players. So, and in Novosibirsk here we have only 1,800,000. Then I traveled to Egypt and also was visiting pyramids. Maybe you saw I've took some pictures. Okay, just a few minutes and we will start. By the way, please tell me about the sound and video quality, how good it is. So for those who would like to watch my YouTube stream, I also provide you with the link. This is the link for the stream. And again, for those who is watching on YouTube but would like to join Twitch, which I highly recommend you doing, this is the link for my Twitch account. Okay, what we are going to talk about? We are going to talk about calculation today. I think this is the most important aspect of chess, and this is what every player should do properly. Well, before we start the main part of the webinar, I would like to show you this position, which is taken from the game between two of my students. You can, it's actually white to move. White played rook a to f1, allowing black to capture on f5, which is not a big problem because after rook f5, even without this light squared bishop, white dominates. But when white decided to play rook a to f1 and let them take the bishop, we are sure that this position is winning. However, black played a move and miscalculated. So please look at this position and suggest anything that could at least help black to save their position, or maybe to prolong the game, or I don't know. So what do you think? What black should do? f7 is hanging. How to deal with it? What you can say? Yeah, I do read Twitch chat. Of course, you can suggest there. I also read YouTube chat. So if you were black, which move would you play? Knight h8. No, I believe you wanted to say knight. Or king h8. No, king h8, rook f7, I believe. Then looks like white is completely winning. No, in this position, white is only one pawn down, but they fully dominate the game. So knight h8. This move was played in the game, which was a mistake actually. When you are under the pressure, you should be looking for such moves, candidates that allow you to save the position or to overtake the initiative. At least it should be, at least your opponent should understand that this is the way how you may overtake the initiative. Maybe even if this move blunders and even is not the best option, but at least the move is difficult and lead to the position where you can when you can still continue playing this game. So in this position, of course, knight h8 is one of the typical move candidates. So if we can't find anything better, then we would definitely play knight h8 to protect on f7. What other moves to consider? No, such move like h6 is another option. If h6 is played, white can continue with just rook f7 with equal material, but with absolutely winning position. And then the best thing that can be played is queen g5. Trading the queens also offers a better endgame for white, I would say almost winning, but retreating with the queen is better. For example, queen f3 with the threat. What is that threat? What do you think? So please try to picture this position in your mind. h6, okay, let me just continue. h6, rook takes f7, queen g5, queen f3. What can you say about this position? What is the next white threat? Okay, I'm watching all the questions and I'll definitely answer when I find a certain moment. No, rook f8 is not a threat because the king gets the square to escape on h7. So rook f8, knight f8, then what? Queen. We sacrifice the queen, but the king escapes to h7. h6 is already played on the board. That's why the king gets an escape square on h7. That's why, no, rook f8 is not a threat. Okay, of course, we are threatening with rook g7, king g7 and queen f7 check, after which at least we gain the rook back, we capture on e8 and continue our attack, and I believe it will be a checkmate. So you don't need to calculate the line to the very end, because usually we calculate the line until we see that there are forcing moves. So for example, we or our opponent can play a forcing move that forces us to play this or that way, or we can play a forcing move that forces the enemy king, for example, to play this or that way. We can still continue the attack, but it's not required. If you do that, it takes too much time. You'd better just find something simple that offers a solid advantage, after which you can say that you will definitely win the game, or at least you say the position is better there than it is now. Then you decide that, okay, let's stop with this line and analyze other moves candidates. So rook g7 is a threat, of course. And if only black allows us to do that, we win. Let me remove these arrows. So what they should play in such a position? We are threatening with rook g7. 95 maybe. Yeah, 95. 95 looks like a fork, but I don't want you to trade the dark squared bishop that is good on d6 and prevents the d7 pawn from any movements. Because while the pawn is on d7, the bishop on c8 is still bad. We can continue with queen e4, creating a pin. And if now the knight, black decides to capture on f7 with their knight on e5, they just lose the rook on e8 as well as the knight on f7. And we will be a minor piece up. If they play something else, at least we may capture on e5 and then play rook f8. Or play rook f8 first and then capture on e5. These two pieces are not participating in the game. So now we come up to the decision that h6 is not a good move for black because it leads to rook f7. Rook f7, after which queen g5 looks like the best option, otherwise they lose everything. And in such a case we don't trade the queens but play queen e3 with the threat of rook g7, and we are not afraid of rook e5. Okay, so h6 is covered. What is the other move candidate? Okay, for everyone who joined the webinar recently, I would like you to suggest several moves candidates for black in this position. White is definitely dominating in this game. What do you think black should do, at least to try to prolong the game or overtake the initiative? No, knight h8 is a logical move, but it's too passive. And actually this move was played in the game, but this move wasn't calculated properly by black. However, white did calculate it. So instead of h6, what can you suggest? Okay, I'm sure that Natalia knows the answer. What should we do in case if we are under the attack? Who knows? No. Find the check. Sometimes counterattack. No, if they attack us on the flank, we should open the position in the center, but this rule doesn't work here. The other thing we may do is to trade pieces, especially the queens. That's why queen h4. Queen h4 is definitely what we should analyze, because this move offers a queen's trade, or at least allows black to activate the queen. Now, queen h4. What should white continue after this move? Of course, they can retreat. But maybe it makes sense to trade the queens and then capture on f7. What do you think? This is the most natural continuation, and we should analyze it. So black plays queen h4, white takes that queen, knight takes white queen on h4, and white captures on f7, with the obvious threat of delivering a check on f8. Knight g6 back. Yeah, that makes sense, but this is not the best move. Instead of knight g6, let's look at h6 move. Yeah, h6. h6, after which we continue with rook f8, check, rook takes f8, rook takes rook check, king h7. And now white creates a pin on the back rank. To be able to get rid of this pin, black should play b6 or b5 and bishop b7. What do you think white should do to be able to either prevent it or to take the advantage of it? So once again, we are looking at this position. Queen h4, queen takes queen, knight takes h4, rook f7, threatening a checkmate on f8, h6, rook f8 check, rook takes rook, rook takes rook check, king h7, and now black is about to play b6, bishop b7. What white should do? e6. What for? e6, d takes e6. Yeah, it's good that you understand that the position is lost. That's right, but every time you play and you choose the move candidate, you should calculate all logical responses and make the plan what to continue in this or that scenario. And this is how you take the decision of making this move. Exactly, white shouldn't wait that black blunders or resigns immediately. However, once it happened to me, I was losing the game. The position was really sharp and complicated, but actually lost. However, my opponent, who is a grandmaster even nowadays, at that time he was 2500, and had just blundered a rook. Instead of moving his c rook to d1, he moved the e rook to d1. I captured it with the queen and delivered the back rank mate. Oh, actually he resigned. Okay, so now in that position, queen h4, knight h4, rook f7, h6, rook f8, rook takes rook, rook takes on f8 check, king goes to h7, we should play c5. No, knight c5 makes sense, as well as knight a5. But c5 first, with the intention of doing knight d2, knight c4, knight b6. Because if now black decides to play b6 or b5, we just take en passant and promote. For example, let me remove these orange arrows. So let's say b6, c takes b6, bishop b7, rook takes a8, bishop takes a8, and after knight c5 we are threatening with b7, and black loses their light square bishop, or we promote the pawn, of course. Okay, so this is what may happen in case of h6 after queen h4. But this line is much longer, and the chance that white may make a mistake in such a long line is much higher. That's why I would recommend queen h4 for black. Let's just analyze one more line. So queen h4, queen takes queen, knight takes h4, rook f7. What if knight goes back to g6, preventing us from moving the rook to f8? What do you think white should do after that? Who knows? h4, yes, exactly. h4, because if only they take on h4 with their knight, we checkmate on f8. They of course should play h5, and this is where the position gets more complicated, and white is likely to make a mistake. For example, they can play positionally and miss their winning chance. However, the best move is a rook from f7 to f5 to attack the pawn, and this is how they lose the pawn, but the game may continue. They of course shouldn't capture on h4 with the knight, because after rook g5, white threatens with g3 and the knight is trapped. Okay, I see it's too complicated, so that's why let me show everything on the board. So first move we analyzed was h6, rook f7. Queen g5 as the most logical continuation to offer a queen's trade, otherwise everything is hanging. Queen f3. We are threatening with rook g7, king takes g7, and then queen enters the enemy camp, the rook is hanging, and there is also a risk of a checkmate. So knight e5. We don't need to take because our bishop is good, it attacks f8 and it blocks the pawn, but we may play queen e4 with the threat of rook f5 on the next move. Something like that loses the knight for black. So here white is completely winning. This is the moment where they should stop calculation, and they, for example, may look at the position and say, okay, rook f5 is a strong threat. Even if I don't win anything immediately, black are still under the pressure. Knight f3, queen f3. No. Okay, the other line that I think is the best for black is queen h4. Because the position may get too simple, and white would have to play positionally, which they don't want, because before that the position was looked like the game is already over, and just in a few moves black will resign. So here rook f7, threatening with a mate. h6 doesn't work. Check. Take. Take. He goes there. Then c5 to prevent b5. No, maybe knight g6, knight f4. No, knight g6, rook e8, knight f4. But we can still apply our idea with this and gain the bishop. If they play b5 or b6, we take. Bishop b7. Take there, and after knight c5 the game is over. b7 is a huge threat. So what about queen f3 and g3? No, I don't know, but at least they can capture there. Queen f3 is also a good move. Okay, and finally, not this, but knight takes. If knight g6, then h4 with h5. So h5 to stop the pawn, then rook 7 to f5 to attack there, and this is where black could continue the game. At least they could play b6 with bishop b7 idea and lose the pawn on h5. If only they do this, after rook g5, g3, g6, g3, the knight is trapped. So knight f5, rook f takes f5, and black should resign. As for the move that was played in the game, rook h8, it loses immediately, and this is where black made a mistake. So, you know, when you calculate the lines, there are a lot of mistakes you can do. I actually divided them into several types, but the main thing that you may blunder an intermediate move. You may even blunder, or we'd better say overlook, an intermediate move. For example, you were expecting your opponent to play this way, but they found how to improve the combination and played better, which you didn't analyze and got into trouble. So knight h8 is actually the case where black thought, okay, everything is defended. We're still under the pressure, but everything is defended. What should white do? Well, let them think, and maybe we'll have a chance to play b6, bishop b7. That was black's logic. But what they blundered? What do you think white should continue to be able to win the game just in a few moves? Who knows? No, rook f7, knight f7, queen takes f7, king h8. And what then? Come on, guys, I'm sure you know, I mean, you are able to find the solution. Then queen f8? No, queen f8 doesn't work. Queen f8, rook f8. Rook takes f8, queen takes rook, bishop takes f8, and white is down the exchange. Okay, Cornraid suggests rook f3, which is a long plan, but deserves attention. Okay, there is a better way to play instead of rook f3. Come on, guys. Yes, it's about the back rank weakness, but actually the king is alone on the king side, and you may take the advantage of it. No, there is no rook on f5. You can't play rook g5. No, okay. Okay, it's yes, Harrison was correct. He mentioned it on YouTube. It's bishop f8. Oh, okay, and also Anirudh mentioned that bishop f8 works. Thank you. So what does bishop f8 do? Of course, the bishop is immune to capture. If they take, it's a back rank mate. But we are attacking on g7, and the other point is that the queen is the only piece to protect on g7. For example, queen checks and queen g6. But in such a case, they also need to protect the rook on e8. While the enemy queen is on g6, they of course protect the rook, but with bishop from f8 to g7, we force the queen to move and let the rook be captured by white. Okay, I'll explain you. I'll show you on the board. Rook f7. Knight f7 is the most logical move. If not, then they are really under the serious pressure, and we are threatening with maybe just moving the rook out. Maybe rook g7 as well. So knight f7, queen f7, king h8, and now bishop f8. So if they capture, it's a back rank mate. If they try to protect on g7, because we're threatening with this, no, queen g5 doesn't work, we take the rook immediately. But queen b6, king h1, and queen g6 works. However, in this case, we distract the queen and take the rook. After that, the position is completely winning. A few more moves followed, and this is where black resigned. So let's sum it up. In this position, white decided to play rook a to f1 because they were okay with black rook f5, with black knight takes bishop, because after rook f5 they calculated several different options that black could choose, and in all these lines white was winning. However, I think queen h4 was the most complicated one where white could potentially make a mistake. So what you should do when you choose the move? You should analyze different moves candidates, but no, when you take the decision to play this or that move exactly, analyze your opponent's responses and try to calculate the lines accurately, properly, when you pay attention to everything what your opponent may play. For example, like it was here, queen h4, h6, knight h8. And make sure that in all these cases, in all these lines, your position is better than it is right now. Or at least not worse than it is right now. Okay, so we are done with this combination, with this game. Now it's a minute of a self-promotion. So I recently recorded the course about calculation, and this course consists of such exercises that you may take and go through, and this is how you will definitely improve your ability to calculate accurately and properly, and at the same time visualize the position better. I like it is in the webinar, I show everything with the arrows, and then I demonstrate the moves on the board. And if you are unable to visualize the position, you may rewind and watch the video one more time. So what the course consists of? So first of all, I'm talking about mistakes in calculation that are most common and what you should avoid. Actually, today on the webinar, I'm also going to show you one example of one of the typical mistakes. And then I show the exercises that we do together. Actually, here you may find the ELO for which level it's created for. So like 1300, from 1300 to 1700. If you are a beginner like 1000, there are also positions for you. So there I explain how to find moves candidates in different positions, how to calculate what to be looking for. And I think the most important thing is that I show how I calculate, and if you strictly follow my procedure, you will be able to do like that. And finally, I show how grandmasters apply this technique in their games. Here for classical games. And actually today, for the attendees of our webinar, I have a special coupon code which allows you to save 60%. So the course will be just under $40. The coupon code is webinar 93. So you click apply, and the rate is $39.60. Okay, fine. So let's get back to our webinar today. I will, just a sec, I will share the link. So it's only for attendees of the webinar. I'm going to make another sale, but the discount won't be like that. This is the maximum that I offer. So this is the link for you. I also provide you with the same link on YouTube. If you have any questions regarding this course, you may also ask, but today we continue and we'll probably do some of the exercises that are, two of them are shown in the course and just illustrate the typical mistakes and the procedure that I recommend. So the next position, it's black to move. I would say the position is approximately equal. Maybe white is just slightly better, but actually with no real chances to succeed. However, black plays rook b6. And this move contains a trap, a small trap. Who can recognize what is the trap behind this move? Or maybe it's even a blunder, who knows? Well, okay, of course, yes, you may say rook c7, but anyway, before you decide to play something else, you should calculate direct variation, which if they offer a trade, why not to take? This is at least what we should analyze. Okay, here rook b6, rook takes b6, knight takes b6 doesn't offer anything and actually simplifies the position, which is in black favor because they are playing for a draw. Rook c7 maybe looks good, but rook d8. And how to play then? Looks like there is no serious problems. Moreover, instead of rook d8, maybe just rook d6 can be played, and they still offer another rook trade, and maybe will activate the king. So rook c7 doesn't offer a lot. Okay, Forky suggests to remove the defender. Can you please specify what exactly you mean? Okay, and here Anirudh also, I think he agrees with you, and he mentioned that we could just capture on d7. You can take the knight. Okay, rook b6, you take the knight. Okay, that's right. And actually, the threat was that after rook d7, king takes d7, if white captures on b6 immediately, black plays king c7, and the rook is trapped. White has to sacrifice it for a pawn, and black will be winning because they are up the exchange. But the point is that here, at the moment when king takes on d7, rook b6, rook takes d7, king takes d7, white finds an intermediate move, knight e5, an intermediate check that forces the king to get out, and the king will be too far from the rook. Then a rook on b6 can be captured without any complications. Let me now show on the board. Rook b6, rook takes d7, king takes. So if this move, then after king c7 the rook is trapped. And this is actually what black was hoping for, but they blunder it, knight a5. After which the king has to get back, or e8 or d8, doesn't matter. No, let's say even if he goes to d8, we take there, the king gets there, but the rook still has the c6 square to escape. Rook c6 check, then rook gets back, and white wins because of the extra piece. So once again, here the trap was that if white plays quickly, they just blunder. But black at their own overlooked this intermediate check. This is one of the most common mistakes in calculation. So I called it unforeseen check. But actually it's just a private case of intermediate move. Okay, fine. Now I'll show you another position. Okay, let's a little bit stop here and talk about mistakes in calculations. So, how do such mistakes happen? They happen because of several things. Because because of one of the players are unable to calculate the line properly, maybe he's a beginner or the line is too complicated for him, that's why he blunders. But the most common problem is that they just don't look for the prospects of the enemy position and neglect their activity. And sometimes, which is actually true about me, they overestimate their position. So when your position doesn't look good and you have to defend it, you'd better play positionally. Improve it first and then be looking for how to sharpen it, how to find any tactical strikes, combinations, and so on. I sometimes overestimate my position. I think it's maybe even it's worse. I think it's approximately equal or unclear, or even I'm better, because I'm always trying to find something, some opportunities in my position. So that's the reason I overestimate it, and this is actually where I can make such a mistake and blunder or overlook something. So it's typical for every level, even if you're playing with a grandmaster. Okay. Now please look at this position, and now we will do the complete exercise. This is one of the exercises that I demonstrate in my course. So it's white to move in this position. Please tell me what white should do. Who can suggest the move for white? And if you can, please also tell me what you should be looking for before finding the move for white. Okay, so there is a question from Anirudh, but I would like you to clarify this question, because you ask if we only analyze one line instead of several. We analyze several lines, but if we see a forcing move which works better for us, we'd better play it, and then just analyze the only response from our opponent. Okay, yeah, thanks. Queen g3 in this position is a threat. If it was black to move, they would play such a move. What's the idea? F takes g3, f takes g3 check, king goes to the back rank, but rook comes to d1, and it's a back rank mate, the game is over. So what? When we realize what threats does our opponent have, we should make such a move that either defends our position against this threat or creates another threat, which maybe a check or something like that, which doesn't allow them to apply this threat immediately. what move to be looking for in this position? So no, first of all, a4, but we know this move fails because of queen g3. If there were no queens on the board, I would say a4 will be one of the most common moves, because we have a distant passed pawn and we may promote it quickly. The other move to calculate is, of course, rook g7. We take, queen takes, rook takes, king takes on g7, and then we can continue and make several checks, but I don't see any benefits of white's position. Moreover, it's easy to stop a passed pawn with two rooks. This is what we already analyzed on one of our webinars when we were talking about queen versus two rooks. So if you need to promote a pawn or to stop a passed pawn, then two rooks are better than a queen. But in the case if the king is weak, then the queen is better. So rook g7 is one of the options. And the other move is queen f8. Queen f8 allows us to put more pressure on g7, but what is more important, this move doesn't allow black to play queen g3. No, because in case of queen g3, f takes g3, f takes g3, rook d1 check, f takes g3 check, king goes to g1, rook d1 check. Then our queen on f8 helps us to block this check with queen f1, and if they decide to trade their rook for a queen, we will be still one rook up. So what? Queen f8 looks like a good move. It makes queen g3 a bad option. But what to be looking for after queen f8? What do you think? With queen f8 we have the threat of rook g7, but actually what black can do? Tell me what you think. Rook h3. Yeah, at least we should analyze rook h3. Who knows how to reply after rook h3? Yeah, with queen f8 we create a strong threat, and black should find a way of getting rid of it or overtaking the initiative, and such a check like rook h3 maybe is one of the good options. But after rook h3 just g takes h3 and the threat of rook g7 still continues, and there is nothing they can do. A better option is rook g3, which was also mentioned by several of our attendees today. So rook g3, what should we do? If only we take, they take with the queen, king goes to the back rank, and rook d1 is a mate. Yeah, rook g3 is much better than rook h3. So the rook cannot be captured with the pawn. What should we do in such a case? Who knows? Okay, guys, I want you to continue. Yeah. So three viewers suggested queen g3. Sorry, not queen g3, but rook g3. Okay, so you all will be the winners if only then you can find what white should do. No, rook g7, but okay, please calculate rook g7 and tell me in which what exactly should be done. If we play rook queen f8, rook g3, then we play rook g7, queen takes g7. What then? Okay, I'll help you a little bit. We can play queen f5 at this moment. This move is important. Queen f5, so what can be done? Well, first of all, I can say that something like king g8 loses immediately after rook a8. So this is not the option to analyze. The other two options are king h8 and a rook blocks on g6. Let's start with king h8. I'll do it with the other color. King h8. So we have our queen on f5, king on h8, then rook a8 check. The only way to stop it is to play queen g8, sacrifice the queen, but this is where we play queen f6 first, deliver another check. Doesn't really matter how they play. They can move the king to h7 or block with their rook from g3 to g7. Well, let's say this move. Then we just capture the queen. They take with their rook, but leave the other rook unprotected. We just capture it because our queen is on f6. Is it complicated? Okay, I'll show everything on the board. Okay, so queen f8, rook g3, rook takes g7, queen takes g7, queen f5. Now what if rook g6? Still a similar thing. Rook takes queen on g7, the enemy rook on g6 is pinned, that's why they can only capture with the king. And if so, the king is on g7, the rook is on d4, we play queen e5, deliver another fork, capture the rook, and play the position with the queen versus rook, which is absolutely winning. Could you picture the position in your mind? Okay. Okay, once again, try to follow. Queen f8, rook g3, rook takes g7, queen takes g7, queen f5 check. Now they block with the rook on g6, after which we capture on g7 with our rook. The king has to take on g7. Now their king is on g7, their rook is on d4, and our queen is on f5. So we just play queen e5 and fork them. Okay, so if you think it's too complicated to visualize, then this course is definitely for you, because you will learn it, and you may rewind and do it once again and even 10 times to be able to visualize it properly. Some positions are simple, some are hard, so you just choose the one that that is recommended for your current level. And then after you complete, for example, all 1000 levels, then you can choose a stronger and more difficult one, and this is how you improve and get better. So make sure that after you do all these exercises together with me or yourself, but properly, you'll get better in it. Okay, let me show on the board. So queen f8, rook g3. Well, first of all, I just want you to understand that queen g3 doesn't work. Here, after this check, the queen gets to f8. Queen escapes. The queen gets to f1, blocks the check, and king successfully captures. White is winning because of the extra rook. So, but rook g3 works, and now we can't capture, because if only we do that, queen takes there, check, king goes to the back rank, this is a mate. So we can't capture the rook, but we can capture on g7. Queen has to take, otherwise it's actually the only move. Then queen e5, and in this position 3 moves: king g8, king h8, and rook g6. And of course not queen g6, the queen is pinned. So if king g8, the most simple one, and when you solve and when you calculate the line, I recommend you to start with the most logical or the most simple ones. So rook g8 is the most simple, after which you play this move, and they have to play queen f8 and sacrifice the queen. So king h8 is another option. Check. Again, they can only block on g8 with the queen. Now we deliver a fork immediately. They play something, move the king or block with the rook, doesn't really matter. We take there, they have to take it. Of course, you can say they can move the rook on d4, but in such a case, queen h8 is a mate, or at least we capture on g3. So they take with something, and then we capture on d4. If in this position they decide to play rook g6, we take the queen, the king has to take because the rook is pinned, and now we deliver a fork, and this is how we win the game. So now when everything is explained and is shown on the board, what do you think? Is it simple? No, here the rook is pinned, that's why the king has to take. Okay, let's get back. No, okay, and it can be even simple for you if you just follow the procedure and do a lot of exercises. It's okay to do it on your own, but just make sure that you do everything properly, or just follow my recommendations in the course. Okay, fine. So the last thing that I prepared for today is actually my game, where I applied where I applied this idea. We can quickly look at the game this game I played in Tunisia, and I was lucky to win it against a 1967 player, but that time I was about 2200 only, and that was my first tournament after the break. So okay, I'll just show you, and then we stop at a certain moment where I played a move that required calculation but actually was a winning move. You don't know this guy. His name is Rekik Ismail from Tunisia, probably, if I'm not mistaken. He is only 1967. Okay, I was white. e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4. So it's accelerated dragon. c4. I decided to play Mark Z bind. Nowadays I would play in a different way, but c4 is also a really solid move against this strategy. Bishop g7, attacking on d4, bishop e3, d6, knight e3, bishop d7, bishop e2, knight f6, and the line transposed to the ordinary dragon, and I played Mark Z bind against it. Castle, castle. And this is the critical moment of the game where players should choose the most common plan. There are several plans: queen d2, rook c1. So no, this is a slow play where white wants to move their pawn to d5, attack with e7, also to get rid of dark squared bishops, and somehow trade this bishop for something, because it's really bad when the pawns are on light squares. But I played the rook e1 move. Such move also exists. It's not my novelty, but if then black plays properly, this move doesn't look good. So the idea of such a move was to use the rook and activate it to e3, then maybe to h3. Knight d4, bishop d4, so the one bishop moved from the e file, bishop c6, bishop d3. And now I can activate the rook using the third rank. Oh, black plan is quite common. They play something like that. You actually will see it in the game. Then they play e5 and try to get their knight to d4. Of course, they trade dark squared bishops as well. Maybe they can do something else, I'm not sure. Knight e5 doesn't deserve any attention, just f4. They can play rook c8, but it can be a tempo loss. So this plan, knight d7, knight c5, is the most common one. And my goal is to, if they take, I play somehow knight d5 and try to let him take. Then I capture with the pawn and put the pressure on e7. That was my goal. Okay, knight d4, bishop d4, bishop c6, bishop d3, knight d7. I had to take. So, and now I played queen d2. Rook e3, rook h3 looks really good, but they were able to find the way how to defend it. a5, and I was thinking about this move, but decided first to reinforce my attack, but looks like it was too late. e5. Maybe this move is still good, but I played bishop b1. Don't know what for. That was the moment where I spent a lot of time trying to come up with the move, but chose bishop b1. The idea was to attack on d6, because if they make something weird, I can just play rook d1 and capture on d6 on the next move. But queen e7, protecting on d6. Rook d1 anyway, rook a d8, and this is where I made a mistake. No, maybe b3, then bishop c2, a3, b4, that could be a good plan, but I played knight e2. knight e2, b6, and knight g3. With actually no idea, just it was a kind of a waiting plan. King h8, b3 now, and luckily my opponent made a mistake, queen g5. What did he blunder? Who can tell me? It was a small blunder, but it helped me a lot. It helped to remaneuver my pieces and get some advantage. However, right now, when the queen is on e7, the position is approximately equal. However, after queen g5, if only I find the way how to play. No, they didn't lose the pawn. The d6 pawn. So should I take on d6 immediately, but I lose the queen? What do you think? Yeah, thanks. It was rook d3. So rook d3, this is how I trade the queens or get the pawn on d6. So I simplified and forced them to defend. Now h4, I was expecting him to play h5 and this is what he did. Then knight f1, tried to remaneuver my knight. a3 with the intention of b4, but I can't play it right now. No, actually this is what I did. Bishop a4, and it allows me to trade my light squared bishop, which is really bad. So I am slightly better in this position, but there is no clear plan of how to win. However, my opponent blundered it. That was the critical mistake. So what did he blunder with king g7? Okay, guys, don't worry. I'm watching all your comments on Twitch and YouTube. So there was a good question. While you're thinking of what I should do, I'll tell you what the question was. The question was, there is a concept that the calculation can be described as several branches of a certain tree, and yeah, I'm going to explain this concept a little bit later after we come up to the certain position where I took the decision to apply combination. So knight d5, of course, knight d5, it was easy. And actually this move didn't work while his while my rook was on c2, because if only I played there, they capture on c4, and now knight b6 doesn't make any sense because my rook is hanging. I could take, they take, and then I play this move, but then I didn't like the rook c6, if I'm not mistaken. I don't see any a clear advantage. Maybe I am still better, but not much. So after I move the rook, they play knight g7 and knight d5. So now rook c4 doesn't work, but this is what actually I expected. That was played in the game. Even if this move, I take on b6 and deliver a fork. This is how he lost the exchange, but the position is unclear. a4. Rook a1. So why did he play a4. Why didn't he take? If he takes, I take myself and protect on e4. If he takes on e4 immediately, I can take there, attack the knight, then pressure on d6. Should be winning. But he played a4. I played rook e1. Everything looks protected. I was expecting this move, after which I was planning to play rook e3. But this guy played f5. And this is something that he missed there. What do you think he missed? Who can tell me? Please think about the moves that you would look for in this position. White is definitely better, no doubts. E takes f5, maybe, but what then? Because after you take on f5, he brings the other pawn to the center and your h4 is hanging. You have to spend a tempo like g3 to save it. Or maybe you wanted to suggest anything else after e takes f5. Okay, please think. f3. Okay, I see you're looking for passive moves. Actually, f3 was one of my intentions, but the point is that after f3, I can't play rook e3 anymore. After rook c3, I have to play maybe this rook to a2 to put the rook to the passive position, which I didn't want. So f3 was actually not a good idea. Taking is better, but then g3. This is one of the possible options, but there is a much better move, and I'm sure you can find it. Okay. No suggestions, so that's why we won't be wasting time. I'll explain it. It's f4. What's the idea of this move? Yeah, f4. Yeah, that's right. I have rooks, and this idea is good, at least because I opened the files for my rooks. Either the E file or the D file. And then I use his knight passivity. I can play my rook d7 or to e7 if only I open the files for my rooks. So that's the point. What exactly should I calculate? This is where we can apply the concept of branches of a tree. So what are typical moves? What should we calculate here? Oh, this move, f takes e4. This move, rook takes e4. Rook c3. Rook c8 maybe. What else? King comes to f6 and e takes f4. So we should calculate all these 6 options. And they all are, no, each of them is a certain branch, and we may even find several branches on one of these branches. It's difficult to explain, and it's better to visualize. Like, can you imagine a tree? Tree is the line, is the f for move, and one of the branches is e takes f5, e takes f4 is the other one, rook c3, another one, and rook c8, king f6. So there are a lot of branches, and in some of them you will even face with deviations that also should be analyzed. So it's a big tree, like with several branches, and all of them also have several deviations. Difficult to show with the fingers. Okay, let me explain. So first of all, f takes e4, I take on e5. And what then? I attack the pawn on d6. If he takes, I play rook d7 and gain the knight. If he doesn't take, then I take myself and create a distant passed pawn. Rook takes e4 is not better. I trade the rooks, he captures, and then I capture on e5. Same thing. If he takes, I gain the knight. If he doesn't, I gain the pawn on d6, and this is my passed pawn. What else? Rook c3. Still too slow. In such a case, I capture on e5, they capture on a3, I capture on d6, and my passed pawn will be promoted much faster. Same thing with rook c8. Still do the same, then capture on d6. If they capture on... Oh, if they play king f6 first, I take on e5. Now, if d takes e5, my rook d7 still works, because it traps the knight. I don't even need to deliver a check, I just need to attack the knight, because it doesn't have any squares to escape. So king f6, f takes e5. Here in king f6 we have two different branches. Pawn takes, which we analyzed, and king takes, which is the other one. Then I take on f5 with the check. And if the king takes, then I still do the same thing. I enter the enemy camp with rook e7 move. If the king doesn't take, I can even capture on g6. So rook e7, now the knight is not trapped, it gets to d8, but I take on d7, I take on d6 and attack it one more time. The knight still escapes, but I already captured all his pawn center. And maybe then we'll look after the a4 pawn. So what else? King f6, e takes f4, another line, after which I still capture on f5, threatening with rook e7. Let me show everything on the board. F takes e4, this is what was played in the game. I take there with rook d7 threat. They played king f7, I took even there, threatening with d7, king e6, d7, knight d8 blocking it, and anything but b5 was played by me. So there were a few more moves, after which he resigned. Check. And then finally I played rook b8, after which he resigned because I promote on the next move. So let's go back. So they take, I take on e5. If they take with their rook, I trade the rooks and still take on e5 with the same idea. If they play rook c3, this is too slow. I take there, and if they take, I gain the knight. If not, I take on d6, and my passed pawn is more important. Same thing happens with rook c8 instead. So even if he does this move, I can still capture there. And if knight d6, I double and gain the knight. If rook d6, I can probably play this move, threatening with a fork. They maybe do this, I take there, they take there, and then I play this move. In case of knight d6, I just capture the other pawn on a4. Or maybe rook d2 can be played as well. So rook c8 doesn't work. What else? King f6, my favorite line. I take, if the king takes, e takes f5. And now if they don't take, I take myself on g6 and promote the g pawn. If they take with the king, then rook e7 works pretty well. Then I capture on d6. Rook c8 or knight c6. However, after knight c6, I maybe play rook c7. But if rook c8, I can play this move and the game is over. So if they capture with the d pawn, then rook d7 even wins the knight immediately. And the last line is e takes f4, which allows me either to capture or to push the pawn forward. Capture is simpler. What happens then? This is actually the line that I expected him to play, but he didn't. For example, rook c7, f takes g6, king takes g6, and rook d5. Threatening to attack and also to use my other rook to capture the pawn on f4. That was the goal. We can play a few more moves. Yeah, this position is completely winning. Oh, you may say, okay, there is no need to play king f6. What if they play, for example, this move? Just there is no big difference. Rook e4 and I capture this. So if g takes f4, rook e7, of course. If king f6, it's just the similar line to what we analyze. I take there, and then rook e7, rook d6. So f4. This move required calculation, but in all these cases, I get a better position with a clear play to win. Okay, guys, do you have any other questions? Okay, just one more thing, the way of self-promotion once again. So this is my chess calculation workshop. I call it a workshop because this is where you can practice. So then this is the link. If you follow this link and apply coupon code webinar 93, you can get a 60% discount. So for example, you click on this link, then scroll down and you see the full price is only $39.60. And this is what I cover in the course. Most typical mistakes in calculation, I explain them and show how to avoid them. Then I demonstrate the calculation technique. They all are devoted to, the level of the position is mentioned here, so you may choose the ones that you like. The ones that are for your level, and after you complete them, you can take the more difficult ones. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. You can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. What else? I also would like you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Oh, Prof Blunder Master came. Okay, this is good because the next thing that I wanted to mention is that my course on Chessable is published. So the name of the course is Victorious Can Sicilian, and this is the full course about Can Sicilian for Black. Yeah, it's fully ready. You can enroll in it. I don't remember what was the price for the course. Probably I can find it. Oh, actually, no, it's not written here, but I'm sure you can see. So yes, Sheldon, I remember your request, so we can. I'll answer by email. Okay, fine. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you'll come to my next webinar, which will be next Sunday. And of course, I believe this calculation workshop will definitely help you to improve. So thank you for your attention and see you next Sunday.